Hello, I'm the awesome Tutor, and today we're going to be looking at inflation. Now, inflation is the sustained increase in the general price level and a decrease in the purchasing value of money. Definitions are key in economics, especially in multiple choice. We have two causes of inflation. The first one is shown here. We have aggregate demand and long-run aggregate supply. Aggregate demand shifts to the right, and as we can see, price goes up and output goes up. And because price goes up, we see there is inflation. Okay? And because it is caused by a shift in aggregate demand to the right, we call this demand pull inflation. Because it's demand that is causing the inflation. So any change, any increase in consumer spending, in government expenditure, in net exports, any increase in those, and also investment, which are all components in aggregate demand, will shift aggregate demand to the right, causing demand pull inflation. Now, can you guess what the next cause of inflation is? The next cause is a shift in aggregate supply to the left, because this increases prices from P to P1 and also decreases output from Y to Y1. So because the price level increases, that's inflation, and because it's caused by supply, we call it cost push inflation. Because what shifts long-run aggregate supply to the left? It is an increase in the cost of production. So for example, if the government starts increasing tax, that will be an increased cost of production. So aggregate supply will shift to the left and prices go up, causing inflation. Now, which of the two is worse? It's cost push inflation, because at least with demand pull inflation, output is going up. So there's some form of economic growth. But with cost push inflation, prices are going up and output is decreasing. And this is very difficult to get out of. So cost push inflation is a nightmare. Next. Now, consequences of inflation. Before we talk about consequences of inflation, we need to know the difference between real income and nominal income, and the difference between real interest rates and nominal interest rates. Nominal income is your take-home pay. Okay? It's not been adjusted for inflation. Your real income, however, is the percentage change in your nominal income take away the rate of inflation. So real income is adjusted for inflation. Now here we have an example. Your income increases from £1,000 in year 1 to £1,100 in year 2. So that is a 10% increase. The product's price has increased from £500 to £550. That is also a 10% increase. So the rate of inflation is 10%. And your income has increased because of that inflation by 10%. What is your real income? It is 0%. Okay? Your real income has not changed. It is perfectly adjusted for inflation. Okay? You could buy 2 of the product here. You can buy 2 of the product here with your 1,000 income. Alright? And in year 2, you can also buy 2 of that product with your increased income. Your real income has stayed the same. It is perfectly adjusted for inflation. Now if nominal income increase is bigger than the rate of inflation, then your real income will have increased. You will have benefited from this inflation. Okay, that usually happens with the rich people like bankers. Your increase in real income will be higher than inflation. So your standard of living will get better. But for the poor people, for example, their increase in income will probably be nothing because, well, that's just how it is. Poor people, their nominal income stays the same. Okay, so they get poorer and poorer and poorer as rate of inflation increases. So the value of their real income actually decreases. Now, real interest rates and nominal interest rates are pretty much the same thing, but for interest rates. So let me go through that. So real interest rates are calculated the same way the real income is calculated. The percentage change in the nominal take away the rate of inflation. So say the nominal interest rate, the one that's not been adjusted for inflation, is 2%. But the rate of inflation is 5%. The real interest rate is going to be negative 3%. So the value of interest has decreased by 3%. Okay? Now what is the effect of that on savers and borrowers? Now remember, interest rate is the cost of borrowing and return on savings expressed as a percentage. So the value of savings will go down because you're getting less increases from your savings compared to inflation. So the value of it is going down. Borrowers, the value of their debts is also going down. For savers, it's a bad thing. For borrowers, it's a good thing because if the value of their debts goes down, the rate of inflation is higher than the nominal interest rate. Means, so the rate of inflation is higher, usually their wages are higher. So it's easier for them to pay off their debts because the value of their debts has also decreased. So it's easier to pay off their debts, so it's good for them. However, this all depends if inflation is either anticipated or unexpected. If inflation is anticipated, the banks will usually raise their interest rates to match the rate of inflation, or they'll make it higher than the rate of inflation. But if it's unexpected, they're not going to have time to do this. Okay? So, the value of interest rates will decrease. Next. Another consequence of inflation is uncertainty. So, confidence decreases. If inflation is going up and up and up and up, there's going to be a lack of confidence. Things are not going to get better for you as a consumer, for you as a business. Okay? Consumption decreases. And also investment decreases. And they're components of aggregate demand, so aggregate demand decreases. Shifting to the left. Okay, decreasing price, but the most important part is decreasing output. So it's hindering economic growth, making things worse. Now, whether it causes deflation or not depends on whether it's demand pull inflation or cost push inflation. Here it's cost push because, as you can see, the long-run aggregate supply is very high up in the diagram. And it also depends on the spare capacity or the negative output gap, the difference between the actual output and the potential output, Y star. So if you say aggregate demand is here, and then it decreases there, prices will decrease, but output does not decrease by that much because of the graph and because it's very, very close to, this is Y star, and it's very, very close to the potential output. There is a small negative output gap. Okay? But say if aggregate demand was here, and then it shifted to the left, okay, output decreases, but price doesn't decrease by that much. Okay, because it has a large negative output gap. The spare capacity between the actual output here and the potential output y star is large. Mind you, this is the Keynesian diagram, not the neoclassical, which I find the Keynesian to be better to use for evaluation especially. Now, if uncertainty only affects aggregate demand, why have I drawn two diagrams? Because it doesn't just affect aggregate demand. It also affects aggregate supply. It makes it shift to the left, but it's a different shift from the one I showed you in cost push inflation. Here, the potential output decreases. Okay, so y star decreases. Okay, let me just rub that out because I want you to focus on the red parts now. So this causes an increase in price, worsening inflation, and it decreases actual output as well as potential output. Okay, which is obviously bad. And it makes economic growth, it worsens economic growth. Now, why does long-run aggregate supply shift to the left like this? Why does the potential output decrease? Well, that's all to do with the factors of production. Okay, land, labor, capital, enterprise. If uncertainty causes investment to decrease, investment into capital, okay, capital is a factor of production. So with less investment into capital, the factors of production, the quantity decreases, which causes potential output to decrease, causing long-run aggregate supply to shift to the left in this way. Okay? Next. So, relative inflation. So, say we're the US. Alright? Our rate of inflation is very high, say 30%. That's ridiculous, but we're going to keep it like that. The UK's rate of inflation, say, is 2%. So, if our general price level is higher, then obviously the price of our exports will be higher compared to the price of the UK's exports. So Japan, which export is it more likely to buy? Our exports, where our price is higher, or the UK's exports, where their price is lower? It's going to buy exports from the UK. Okay, so the demand for our exports decreases. Okay, demand decreases. And we lose international competitiveness in trade. Also, if our domestic goods, so just us now, if our domestic goods are very expensive because of inflation and the purchasing value of our money is low, okay? So the main thing is, our domestic goods are already expensive. What are we more likely to buy? We're more likely to buy foreign goods, imports, because they're cheaper than buying domestic goods from our own country. So, the demand for imports increases. Now this has an effect on, obviously, net exports. Demand for exports decreases because of loss of international competitiveness, because our relative inflation is high and the price of our exports is high. And imports, demand for that increases because imports are relatively cheaper compared to buying domestic goods. So, net exports decreases, which is a component of aggregate demand, so aggregate demand decreases. So if you wanted to draw a diagram to explain this, okay, long run aggregate supply, aggregate demand shifts to the left. Next. Okay, I'm going to start racing through these now because these ones are fairly easy to understand. Redistribution of wealth. So if you have wealth in the form of assets, okay, physical assets like property and land, the value of those increases rapidly because of inflation. But if you have like cash, for example, in savings or not in the savings, the value of that is going to decrease. Okay, because it's not physical. The purchasing value of that money you have will decrease. But if you have wealth in the form of physical assets like land or property, the value of that increases. So you essentially become wealthier. Industrial disputes and conflicts, alright? This is due to pay negotiation. If rate of inflation is high, then you're going to demand higher wages, okay, to compensate for the increased rate of inflation. Alright, and this pay negotiation wastes time. So productivity goes down and economic growth decreases. Next. So as I said before, wages are going to go up because of inflation. You're going to demand higher wages to compensate for that rate of inflation. So this leads to further inflation. Why? Because cost of production increases for businesses. They have to pay your wages. So, long-run aggregate supply shifts to the left, okay, increasing price and decreasing output. The important part, increasing price, so inflation increases further. Now, if inflation increases further, what are you going to do now? You're going to demand even higher wages because inflation is even higher than it was before. And what's that going to do? That's going to increase cost of production even more, which will shift long-run aggregate supply to the left even more. Increasing price more, increasing inflation more. So this is what you call a wage cost spiral. Inflation increases, you're going to demand more wages. Cost of production increases. Long-run aggregate supply decreases. Price increases, so inflation goes up, more wages. Inflation goes up, wages go up. Wage cost spiral. Very difficult to get out of. Next, menu costs. If inflation is increasing prices, then you as a business are going to have to constantly change your prices to match that of inflation. So if you have those prices in the form of a physical menu, you're going to have to constantly print more and more menus, changing the price, which is very costly. But it's easier now because of, digital stuff. Okay, you can have a digital menu or online shopping, you can just change the price easily, but you still need someone to do that. So there is some form of cost, at least, for many costs. Now, shoe leather cost, okay, if inflation is high and prices are high, you are gonna look for the best deal. The best prices that are good for you. So the lowest prices or the best banks with the lowest inflation rate, okay? And that's going to cost you time, okay? Shoe leather cost, okay? In the past, you had to physically carry your money to transfer it from one place to another. So like the leather of your shoe is eroding away. That's where the term came from. So important thing is there's an opportunity cost, okay? Instead of wasting your time looking for better deals, better prices, you could be using that time more productively. Now, fiscal drag. Okay, we have tax brackets. Alright? I'm not going to explain what they are too much. Now, tax brackets, if you have a certain amount of income, you are in a certain tax bracket. So you have to pay a certain amount of tax. If inflation increases, okay, your income is going to increase because wages go up. That's going to drag you into a higher tax bracket, okay, which have not been adjusted for inflation, okay, because that takes time. Therefore, you're going to have to pay even more tax, which is bad for you, obviously. Next, however, okay, your evaluation points. It depends on the amount of inflation. If the rate of inflation is significantly high, obviously it's going to impact the economy more. If the amount of inflation is small, not that big of an impact. okay, consumption and investment may go up instead of going down because of uncertainty. So the reason they may go up is if prices are going to increase, then what is the logical response? Buy now while it is cheaper, okay, especially for luxury goods, okay, necessities like your groceries, you're gonna need to buy them either way, okay. Luxury items like, say, a flat screen TV, you are gonna buy it now while prices are low instead of waiting for inflation to increase even more, so it's harder for you to buy it. So also for investment, you're gonna invest now rather than wait for prices to increase and inflation to increase. So this will boost economic growth and employment. Also depends on the duration of inflation. If inflation lasts for a long time, it is significantly worse than if it lasts for a short time. Now the wealth effect, when I was talking about redistribution of wealth and your assets and your houses, your physical assets, property and land, the value of those go up, so that may boost your spending and therefore growth. Type of inflation, if it's cost push or demand pull. Cost push, significantly worse because output decreases and prices go up. But demand pull, prices go up but also output increases. But that depends on the spare capacity. Expected or unexpected inflation. If inflation is expected, things are going to be adjusted. Remember when I was talking about nominal and real? Okay, that relates to this. If it's unexpected inflation, that is worse because things are going to need time to adjust and it's going to hit you harder. Alright, it's going to hit the economy harder and it's going to have a bigger impact, negative impact. Now, the negative output gap, the spare capacity, the capacity between the actual output and the potential output, shown by the green dotted line, Y star. Here, the negative output gap, we start here, is big. A big negative output gap. A lot of spare capacity. So if it's demand inflation, aggregate demand increases. As you can see, prices don't increase by that much, but output increases a lot, so that's good. But if you have a small negative output gap, okay, a small spare capacity between the actual output and the potential output, if aggregate demand increases, prices are going to increase significantly with a small, meaningless increase in output. This has been the Awesome Tutor. Bye.